The bar exam is so universally known to be difficult that it's practically become a metaphor. For example, I'd rather write the bar exam than go on another date with that schmuck. You see, it's a thing. The bar exam is hard, but before law students can even face down that punishing brute, they need to graduate from law school, which requires them to, you guessed it, pass their law school exams. Well, to equip you with the best advice to do well in these is none other than licensed attorney, law professor, and YouTube personality Beau Biaz, who you may know from the Learn Law Better channel. And since 2001, Beau has taught thousands of law school students, even receiving the Best Professor of the Year award at 2 different schools. And today he's going to walk us through the gauntlet of law school exams so that you know what to expect and how to prepare. Let's go. Okay, Beau, so first of all, for any viewers who might not yet be in law school, let's start with how these exams work. Can you give us a little context, like when do they happen, how many do law students have to take, how they're formatted, etc.?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, legal education, I think, is still stuck in the 1960s. Most of American education shifted 50 years ago, and we really haven't.
Yeah.
So what that means at most law schools, one final exam. At a few law schools, one final exam for the whole year, right?
Wow.
So you might start in August and nothing in December, and then in May you have something that everything rides on. That was sort of my experience in law school. Now, a few professors are becoming more progressive in the sense that they're also giving a midterm. That midterm may or may not be graded at many schools. They're not even graded exams. So again, everything rides, all your grades ride on one final exam. So no pressure, nothing to worry about. So obviously there's a lot of anxiety going into it. So again, you'll occasionally find a different professor. I tend to be a little bit of an outlier. I do assessments throughout the semester, a few quizzes, a few discussion board posts, but I'll tell you, it's probably less than 1% of the faculty out there do those kind of assessments. And by the way, I'm talking here about doctrinal classes, torts, contracts, property, not legal writing. The legal writing class is different. There you will have multiple assessments, completely different approach, and what we're not talking about today.
Wow, that's nuts. So if you have a bad day, whoops, kind of screwed.
Yes, I actually had a student a few years ago, and she didn't realize she could reschedule an exam. So she got A's on all her exams except mine. She had a horrible cold. She went into the exam, ended up getting a C. It was the one outlier. And I said, you should have talked to the registrar, the person who could have moved your exam date. And she just didn't know.
Yeah. Well, that's good for our viewers to know. So thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So tell me, how do law school exams fundamentally differ from the kinds of exams students may have seen in college or up until this point?
So most exams, and I would say, first, let me step back. Law school exams are essay questions,
okay,
by and large. Again, you'll find a few outliers, professors who throw in some multiple choice questions, but by and large, almost all essays, maybe multiple choice. So let's focus on the essay because that's 90% of what you're going to see. So the essay exam requires analytical thinking. And here's what I mean. So you're going to have to state a rule, the law, the content. And in that sense, you're used to content from undergrad. So, who was the president of the United States, in 1904, kind of things like that. So that's the content. You need to know the law, but most of a law school exam is not focused on the law, surprisingly enough. It's taking the law, the content, and applying it to a set of facts you've never seen before.
Right.
Most of the points on a law school exam are in that application section. And that's very different than what you've seen in the past. In college, most faculty, even on essay exams, rewarded students for demonstrating they knew the content.
Right.
So the student who could write the most and could demonstrate, they really know the material from Speech 101 or Philosophy 309, got more points, got A's. And also the professor wasn't limited in the number of A's that they could give. Law school, the professor can only give a certain number of A's. There are forced grading systems at every school. So out of a class of 60, maybe 2 A's, 4 A minuses, 7 B pluses, down the road. And in some schools, they have to give D's and F's. That's a requirement. I mean, that tends to be at the lower ranked schools that are having challenges with bar passage.
Right.
So back to the essay question, the professor is looking for analytical thinking. Now, there are basically 2 types of law school exams. So the one I just described, analytical thinking, I think that's what the majority of professors give. But there's another type of essay exam called an issue spotter exam.
Mm-hmm.
This is where you really aren't rewarded for application of law to facts, or I'm sorry, facts to law, the weaving of those 2 together. Instead, the issue spotter exam, what they're doing is trying to see how many issues you can find on an essay exam. So I was talking to one colleague, and what he does, he'll give an exam, he'll give a 1-page set of facts, and on that 1 page, there may be 40 issues, on 1 page. And you then have an hour, hour and a half to spot as many of them as you can in sentence form. It's still an essay. So first issue is whether Joe committed a battery against Frank, and then maybe a quick fact and a conclusion. Second issue is whether Francis committed a battery. And then you just kind of work through them. And he said on his exams, no student ever gets more than 75% of the issues right. They don't spot them. There are just so many issues. It really becomes impossible. And so the rationale for that type of exam is trying to mimic a real world situation where the client comes into the lawyer, and then the lawyer then has to determine, based on some rambling story by the client, what issues are going to be litigated. So anyway.
Yeah, it sounds so much like it's a skills-based assessment, or more than content knowledge. I mean, obviously your dexterity with the content is important, but mostly it's like skills-based, which comes down to practice then.
Yes, it comes down to practice. So from day one, you need to practice. The mistake most people make is they follow the jam and cram strategy that worked well in college, where you did the reading, you kept up with your notes, had a fun time in college. And by the way, the typical college student, the stats show, spend about 14 hours a week on their studies total, going to class and studying.
Oh, wow.
Law school, we're talking 50 to 60 hours a week. So most people come in thinking, well, I'll work a little bit harder. So if I get up to 24 hours a week, boy, I'm really doing a good job, right? No. So you have to build in exam preparation into your study routine from day one.
Right. It's
a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's just back step a little bit. You started talking about the grading system, and I'm really interested in this because it's like, what if you're in a class with a bunch of smart people, and then anyway. Tell me how the exams are graded, and what do students need to know about the system?
Sure. So about every professor is sort of idiosyncratic. I mean, there is no standard grading methodology. So professors will grade. Now, they do have to grade using some sort of reasonable grading method. But ultimately, it almost doesn't matter because of the forced grading system. What the professor really has to do is force a ranking. So after I use my system of grading, and again, I'm a little bit different. I'm also thinking about providing meaningful feedback to my students. So I tell them, how they did on analytic, application, rule identification, organization, and grammar, spelling. Most faculty don't do that. They'll have a check system, and they'll go, okay, you spotted this issue, and then maybe give them a 1 to 3 points for some issue. Doesn't matter. So at some point, professor ranks everyone top to bottom. And so what that means is no matter how hard you work, you're not being graded on an objective system. It's somewhat subjective in the sense that you're really competing against everyone else in the class.
Right.
So even though you work 60 hours a week, you did all the practice, if 5 people did better than you, well, they get better grades. So that is completely outside of your control. And I think that's the important thing to recognize is you do the best job you can. You go into the exam as prepared as you can, and don't worry about the grades. You don't control the grades.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like good practice for, an actual legal career where your job is essentially to compete with another advocate, another lawyer. So yeah, okay, I get it. There's method to the madness.
Yes. So, and ultimately it doesn't, getting upset about things after the fact, it just doesn't help.
Yeah. You're only as good as your opponent is bad.
Yes, that is true.
All right, so tell me, are these law school exams a decent preview of the MBE? I know there's an essay section in the bar. So is it a good precursor to that?
Yes and no. Most faculty do not give what I call bar exam style essay questions. I do. I think it's important to demonstrate to students what a bar exam style question looks like, which means 3 to 5 issues on every exam, about 3/4 of a page of notes, half an hour. I actually give them 45 minutes because I figure, look, you're still at the beginning of law school, you need a little bit more time. Yeah. But I start mimicking bar exam strategies, but that's not what most faculty do. So we're all over the place. So I would say no as to the format, but yes as to the approach, in the sense that most faculty want some application of law to facts. Right. So in that sense, it does prepare you for the multi-state bar exam. Okay,
cool. So given the way law school exams work, what is your best advice for studying for them? I know you said, practicing from day one is really important. So what else do you have?
Yeah. So again, it's a marathon. So you have to think about, I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of his 7 habits of highly effective people is keep the end in mind. Mm-hmm. The end is that exam. Everything you do, your class reading, your class prep, study groups you join should be focused on keeping the end in mind. What's going to help me get top grades, or at least position me to be the best I can be? Yeah. People come to law school with different knowledge, skills, and abilities. And if the best you can be after everything you've done is a B, that's okay.
Yeah.
Nothing says you have to get an A. I mean, you position yourself to get an A. So what do I mean by preparing for the law school exam from day one? Well, that means you have to practice your writing. There is a form that most faculty want to see, and we call it IRAC, issue, rule, application, conclusion, or some variation. I mean, if you quick search on Wikipedia shows about 20 variations, BRAC, CRAC. I said, whatever crack you use is okay with me, as long as there's some organizational system. I mean, the legal crack, IRAC. So use an organizational system. I recommend start with IRAC. Mm-hmm. If your professor has a strong, proclivity and they say, look, use CREAC in my class, then use CREAC in that class. So how do you get practice, right? So most students don't do the practice until 2 weeks before the final. Maybe they do some practice exams. So you have to start doing writing from day one. Mm. So I recommend converting multiple choice questions into mini essay questions. Mm-hmm. So the nice thing about multiple choice questions, and you'll find them at the law school in the bar prep area, they test on very narrow legal issues. So let's say in the first week of class, you do battery. Well, then you find a multiple choice question dealing with battery, answer the question, and then convert it. So the question may have been dealing with John and Frank and some prank that they pulled. So then convert it and say, all right, the issue is whether John committed a battery against Frank when he pulled the chair from him at school. That's your issue statement. Then prepare a rule statement. Battery is defined as, the intentional, harmful, or offensive contact of another, and then a conclusion. Then you move to the next paragraph. The next issue is whether there was intent, new paragraph, and you go through IRAC in that paragraph, and so on and so on. Okay. And now you've done practice. Now you need feedback. So I recommend find a study buddy, swap your answers. If your law school has an academic support department, go talk to them. But you want to start practicing your writing every week. Now, you're not going to have time necessarily every day, but reserve a couple hours every weekend for exam preparation.
Right. Wow, these discussions are making me aware of just how spoon-fed I was in college. In my undergrad, it's crazy. Just like everything you needed to do, they told you. They gave you the assignments. They marked the assignments. You didn't have to seek this information out or think of crafty ways to practice yourself. It's crazy. Yeah,
it's very different.
Yeah. All right, so I know the general advice for exam prep is the earlier you start, the better, but time in law school is notoriously scarce. So when do you recommend students should start studying, and how can they manage their time effectively?
So I recommend creating a flexible schedule. I think the mistake many people make is they have a very detailed schedule where, look, from 9 to 10, I do torts, from 10 to 11. And the challenge with that, well, let me step back. If that kind of scheduling works for you, then do it. And that does work for 40, 50% of the people. But for the rest of us, what happens is you get frustrated. All of a sudden something happens and you can't keep the schedule, and then you get dissuaded, and then you just blow the schedule. And then you say, well, scheduling is not for me. So instead think, all right, between 9 and 11, I study, right? That creates some flexibility. Leave gaps in your schedule so that when life happens, you can go do life and not worry about it. And then recognize that if something does happen, let's say you have to move a study item because a friend comes by crying because they were humiliated in class, then move your study time. I mean, you want to make sure that you keep doing the things that are important. And that means reevaluating your schedule, building in exam prep time into your schedule, building review time daily into your schedule. And all these things are important. Because again, if you wait to the end, it's not going to work.
Right. Yeah. Cramming is not a thing in law school.
No.
All right. Well, is there a way students can study for their law school exams and the bar at the same time? Kill two birds with one stone?
So if you can move, if you are studying the right way, you are doing that. So the cram and jam approach, what it really does is it moves things into working memory for a short period of time, and then you forget it. But if instead you keep reinforcing information throughout the semester using flashcards, using advanced study techniques, then you have effectively moved it from short-term memory to long-term memory. So given the way that I teach, I have quizzes, I do all sorts of things to force students to constantly re-engage with the material. Right. So I recently got an email from a former student a few years ago, and she said, Professor Biaz, when I was getting ready for my tort for the bar exam, the one bit of material I knew was torts, because I remembered everything from your class because of your quizzes, everything that you did to force me to move it into long-term memory.
Right.
So the key is to constantly, every week, re-engage with the material.
Yes.
And I think for content, I think having some form of flashcards is excellent. That helps you to really learn the rules, then taking those rules, putting it into your own word in an outline, reviewing your outline. Once it's in long-term memory, then your goal, not only for the final exam, but for the bar exam and for practice. All of a sudden, you'll remember this 8 years into the future because you learned it now.
Yeah, and that's great. And I mean, shameless plug here, but Brainscape has a MBE collection of flashcards certified, created by our team of legal experts. So if you want something for rote memorization, check it out. Okay, well now please tell me how your YouTube channel and website Learn Law Better can help students prepare for their exams and a career in law.
So I do on my YouTube channel, it's primarily based on law school success. And so I provide just various tips along the way, how to improve. Some of them are very advanced, some are more basic, some of the things we've talked about here, just sort of demystifying the law school experience. And I don't expect anybody to watch all 160 videos. Some people claim they have. That's a lot of binge watching. You should probably be studying rather than watching videos. But it just sort of helps law students understand what legal education is about and providing information in a different way. I don't think anything that I necessarily provide is new or different, but I do tend to focus on the law school experience. And then, privately, I have a private tutoring business. I meet with students one-on-one. In fact, it's summertime now, and I'm meeting with students who are preparing for their 1L year. We're kind of working on exam writing skills. Because you're going to find that once you get into law school, the amount of free time you have narrows. You do have to carve out some time, but right now, the summer before law school, you have much more time. Unless you're working or something else. So with one-on-one tutoring, whether it's with me or some other tutor, this is the time to really start developing those exam writing skills, which will help you know how to prepare for class. Because once you have the end in mind, you know what's expected, then everything you do, class prep, class review, weekly review, it all comes into focus. And so you are now preparing everything the right way.
Study smart.
Study smart.
Awesome. Well, Beau, thank you so much for speaking to me today and for this excellent advice you've provided. Truly, it's been amazing.
Well, great. Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, and thank you for the opportunity to come in and chat.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it. The best advice for taking on your law school exams and even the bar, courtesy of licensed attorney and experienced law professor, Beau Biaz. For even more great advice or even tutoring sessions, courses, and study aids, check out Beau's YouTube channel and website, Learn Law Better. If you're in law school or preparing to take the bar exam, you should really get Brainscape certified MBE flashcards in your corner. This collection contains over 2,600 adaptive flashcards that will drill you on the key concepts you'll probably find in big bar review courses like Barbary or Themis, but condensed down to a super efficient flashcard format that helps you study more efficiently with spaced repetition. And whether you're in law school, just trying to keep your head above water, or preparing to take the biggest exam of your life, these can be a real lifeline to helping you get the content down pat. Brainscape also has a law academy packed with helpful guides on topics you'll no doubt be familiar with, like dealing with bar exam stress, studying for the bar, acing law firm interviews, and making key decisions like picking a bar review course and a law specialty as you embark upon your career. So grab these tools, study hard, and rise to your challenge.